Announcements.
Honourable members, I wish to refer to a matter reported in the press in relation to a correspondence addressed to me by Honourable Juman, dated 15th July 2021, expressing his views and concerns on the fact that the Honourable Minister of Public Service, Administrative and Institutional Reforms had, when replying to PQ B659 and B680 on 13 July 2021, cited the full names of the public officer whose death was the subject matter of the said PQ, seeking information as to if an inquiry had been conducted by his ministry thereinto. Members, I wish to draw the attention of the House to the fact that Standing Order 22 provides that questions shall not include the names of persons or statements of facts unless they are necessary to make the question intelligible. And the same principle applies to the other parts of the proceedings of the House, including replies to questions by honourable ministers as their matter of practice. In light of the aforesaid, should Honourable Juman or any other member at the time the Honourable Minister of Public Service, Administrative and Institutional Reforms mention the name of Mrs. F.M. in disregard of the aforesaid principle, in the view of the Honourable Member, the said Honourable Member or any other Honourable Member, for that matter, had the duty to draw my attention thereto, as is provided for regarding the procedure of drawing the attention of the Chair when a breach of standing order is purportedly being committed there and then. As such, Honourable Juman is not entitled procedurally to draw my view thereto at an ulterior time, the more so, as the full names of Mrs. F.M. and the tragic circumstances of her death had already been the subject matter of wide press coverage and therefore well in the public domain. Moreover, regarding the private correspondence addressed to me by Honourable Juman, it is a matter of grave concern that the private verbal reply I made to him in line with the above had found its way in the press and in the public domain. This is squarely not in order. May I also, at this juncture, inform the House that the finality and purport of the aforesaid correspondence from Honourable Juman was requiring me to order the Honourable Minister to tender unreserved apology in the Assembly, which is also squarely not in order. Notwithstanding the above, should the Honourable Minister wish to react to the views and concerns expressed by Honourable Juman in the official letter he had addressed to me, and which is now in the public domain, the Honourable Minister may do so by way of statement. Thank you.
Papers have been laid. Question none. Motion.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10.
The question is that all this business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10. Those in favour say aye, those against say no. Aye. The ayes have it.
Statements by ministers none. Public bills second reading.
Monsieur le Président, je propose que le projet de loi numéro 12 de 2021, le Social Contribution and Social Benefits Bill, soit présenté en seconde lecture. C'est devant cette auguste Assemblée qui me revient la responsabilité et la fierté d'ouvrir les débats qui porteront sur l'introduction de cette importante législation. Ce projet de loi, à l'image de la philosophie de justice économique et sociale prônée par notre Premier ministre, vient établir le cadre législatif adéquat de notre nouveau système de cotisation et de prestations sociales. La présentation de ce texte de loi intervient dans le sillage de l'annonce de l'établissement de la contribution sociale généralisée lors du discours du budget 2020-2021. Une réforme d'envergure que ce gouvernement, avec courage et humanisme, est déterminé de mener à bien. Ce changement de paradigme s'inscrit en effet dans le mandat que la population nous a clairement donné. Celui du bien commun, du développement pour tous et de la lutte contre les inégalités. Si je ne devais choisir qu'un seul adjectif pour qualifier ce projet de loi, ce serait celui de progressiste. Car avec cette législation, nous changeons d'état d'esprit. Nous passons d'un modèle individualiste et égoïste à un modèle collectif et solidaire. C'est la pérennisation de la sécurité sociale à Maurice. Qui dit sécurité sociale, dit entraide, protection des plus faibles, démocratie. Monsieur le Président, nous apportons aujourd'hui un changement positif pour le bénéfice de la population. C'est dans cette perspective que les équipes de mon ministère, en collaboration avec celles des différents ministères, institutions et acteurs concernés, ont élaboré une législation exhaustive visant à transformer et à améliorer notre modèle de protection sociale. À ce propos, je tiens à rappeler qu'en amont de la présentation de ce projet de loi à l'Assemblée, nous avons mené d'importantes consultations avec les parties prenantes, incluant les associations patronales et les syndicats. Sous l'égide du comité interministériel présidé par le Premier ministre, un comité technique composé entre autres des représentants du secteur privé et des travailleurs a ainsi fait part de ses recommandations en vue de la rédaction de ce projet de loi. Je me saisis de cette occasion pour leur faire part de mes remerciements pour leur approche coopérative. Découlant de la vision du gouvernement, du travail méticuleux des officiers et de la collaboration avec les différents acteurs concernés, le Social Contribution and Social Benefits Bill couvre de ce fait les sujets relevant du paiement des cotisations sociales par les employés et les employeurs des secteurs publics et privés, ainsi que par les travailleurs indépendants, du paiement des prestations de retraite, du paiement des indemnités d'accident du travail aux salariés ainsi qu'aux travailleurs indépendants, de l'administration de la collecte des cotisations sociales et du paiement des prestations sociales, et enfin de l'établissement d'un mécanisme de révision des différentes prestations sociales. Monsieur le Président, le présent texte de loi s'appuie sur les règlements existants de la CSG, tout en y suppléant et complétant les dispositions nécessaires à la mise en place d'un système de contribution et de bénéfices sociaux qui sera dorénavant bien plus juste, plus durable et plus progressif. En sus, le projet de loi prévoit que les mêmes termes et conditions soient applicables aux travailleurs indépendants et aux employés du secteur public et privé. Par ailleurs, en ce qui concerne les prestations sociales, il est prévu le versement à partir du 1er juillet 2023 et à l'âge de la retraite d'une prestation complémentaire pouvant atteindre 4 500 roupies par mois, le versement d'une prime de fin d'année au titre de la prestation de retraite, le versement d'indemnités pour accident du travail à partir du 1er septembre 2020 à un employé du secteur privé sur la même base que celle du NPF, avec tout de même un changement majeur au profit des employés. L'indemnité maximale payable à un employé blessé passe en effet de 15 920 roupies à 40 000 roupies par mois. C'est formidable et cela méritera que je m'y attarde dans quelques minutes. Enfin, nous permettrons le versement d'indemnités pour accident du travail à tous les travailleurs indépendants cotisants, ce qui aura pour effet direct et immédiat d'améliorer la protection sociale de plus de 200 000 Mauriciens. Monsieur le Président, après avoir brossé dans les grandes lignes l'apport de ce projet de loi et l'objectif de justice sociale qu'il vise, permettez-moi de développer les principales dispositions de ce dernier. En commençant par les principes et mécanismes régissant la contribution sociale, c'est-à-dire la CSG, à travers le Social Contribution and Social Benefits Bill, nous instituons un système de contribution sociale basé sur l'équité et la progressivité. Concrètement, les articles 3 et 4 prévoient que le paiement d'une cotisation sociale mensuelle soit effectué par chaque employé et son employeur. Nous pensons que si tous les citoyens doivent pouvoir jouir des mêmes acquis sociaux, leur contribution à ce régime de sécurité sociale doit, pour être juste, refléter leur capacité de paiement. Tout un chacun doit, à partir du moment où il bénéficie de cette solidarité nationale, y contribuer à la mesure de ses possibilités. C'est dans cet esprit que nous avons opté pour des taux de cotisation progressifs, basés sur le montant des revenus perçus par les travailleurs. Monsieur le Président, cela s'appelle le progrès. Le taux de la cotisation sociale mensuelle à payer par un employé et son employeur, tant dans le secteur privé que dans le secteur public, sont donc fixés comme suit. À hauteur de 1,5% du salaire de base ou du traitement par le salarié et de 3% jusqu'à 50 000 roupies par mois. Et à hauteur de 3% du salaire et ou du traitement de base pour l'employé et à 6% pour l'employeur si l'employé gagne plus de 50 000 roupies mensuellement. Concernant les travailleurs indépendants, nous appliquons à cette même logique de progressivité. Pour plus d'équité, nous révisons les taux de la cotisation sociale mensuelle à payer par tranche de revenus. Ainsi, les taux et montants de contribution pour les travailleurs indépendants seront établis de la façon suivante. 150 roupies lorsque le revenu net mensuel de l'indépendant est inférieur ou égal à 10 000 roupies. 1,5% de 90% de son revenu net mensuel ou bien 150 roupies, le plus élevé des deux, lorsque le revenu net mensuel du travailleur indépendant en question est compris en 10 000 roupies et 50 000 roupies. Et enfin, 3% de 90% du revenu net mensuel pour ceux percevant un revenu net mensuel supérieur à 50 000 roupies. Que ce soit pour les employés du secteur privé, du secteur public ou des travailleurs indépendants, la collecte de ces contributions se fera par la Mauritius Revenue Authority, conformément aux articles 5 à 16 du projet de loi. Je tiens à souligner que ce nouveau mode de calcul apportera un changement extrêmement positif pour les travailleurs mauriciens, mais aussi pour les entreprises. À vrai dire, plus de 80% des entreprises et près de 90% des employés contribueront moins grâce à ce nouveau système. D'ailleurs, l'immense majorité des travailleurs contribuent déjà moins. Les bénéficiaires, eux, percevront plus. C'est un système gagnant-gagnant, tant du côté des contributeurs, entreprises et travailleurs, que du côté des bénéficiaires. Tout le monde y trouve son compte. Monsieur le Président, avec le nouveau système de pension de retraite, chaque retraité mauricien recevra à terme un montant supplémentaire de 4 500 roupies par mois. Cette réforme est la démonstration de notre engagement auprès de la population mauricienne. Avec son soutien, nous bâtissons une société plus juste, plus équitable et plus solidaire. C'est une avancée historique. Notre nouvelle normalité sera d'être plus solidaires et en nous soutenant les uns les autres. Ceux qui ont doivent Ceux qui ont peu doivent pouvoir compter sur ceux qui ont plus. L'État veillera au respect de ce principe sacro-saint. L'entraide devient le pilier de la sécurité sociale mauricienne. Ce faisant, cette réforme est la concrétisation de notre grand projet national. Nous aspirons à bâtir une société qui entend faire prévaloir l'intérêt général sur les intérêts particuliers. C'est, Monsieur le Président, la doctrine socialiste. C'est notre philosophie ici, de ce côté de la Chambre. Monsieur le Président, ce projet de loi prend également en charge le volet corollaire à celui des contributions, c'est-à-dire leurs bénéfices. Grâce à la mise en place d'un tel ensemble législatif, nous allons structurellement améliorer notre système de protection sociale. Que ce soit pour la pension de retraite ou pour les indemnités dues aux accidents du travail, les articles 17 à 31 prévoient en effet le versement de 2 types de prestations sociales, à savoir la prestation de pension de retraite et la prestation pour accident du travail. Je souhaiterais m'attarder sur les acquis sociaux auxquels la population aura maintenant droit. En ce qui concerne la prestation de la pension, elle sera versée à toute personne qui atteint l'âge de la retraite, qui est actuellement de 65 ans. Il y aura 3 catégories de bénéficiaires. En premier lieu, un citoyen résident à Maurice qui a vécu à Maurice pendant au moins 20 ans au total, depuis son 18e anniversaire, et qui a ou non payé des cotisations sociales. En deuxième lieu, un citoyen mauricien résidant à l'étranger qui a habité à Maurice pendant au moins 20 ans au total, depuis son 18e anniversaire, et qui a payé des cotisations sociales pendant une période d'au moins la moitié du nombre d'années entre le 1er septembre 2020 et la date de dépôt de la demande de prestations sociales. Et en dernier lieu, un non-citoyen résident à Maurice qui a séjourné à Maurice pendant au moins 20 ans au total et qui a payé des cotisations sociales pendant une période d'au moins la moitié du nombre d'années entre le 1er septembre 2020 et la date de la demande de prestations sociales. Permettez-moi de rappeler que ces bénéficiaires, s'ils ont précédemment contribué au NPF, percevront en supplément leur dû correspondant à leur contribution au fonds. Ils recevront également à l'âge de 60 ans le Basic Retirement Pension à hauteur de 9 000 roupies par mois. Comme à chaque fois que le gouvernement en a eu l'occasion, nous avons toujours préféré l'addition des bénéfices à leur soustraction. Notre action est guidée par le souci permanent de permettre à la population d'augmenter graduellement son niveau de vie. Nous octroyons de nouveaux acquis sociaux sans remettre en question ceux qui avaient déjà été accordés auparavant. Nous sommes le mouvement socialiste mauricien. Nous sommes des réformistes, nous sommes des progressistes. Monsieur le Président, ce gouvernement prend en considération la pénibilité relative du travail. À cet égard, nous instituons des modalités distinctives pour des employés de certains secteurs d'activité. De ce fait, les employés de ces secteurs spécifiques, à savoir le sucre, le sel, le thé, la fabrication de blocs de ciment et les transports publics, qui sont autorisés à prendre leur retraite avant l'âge officiel de la retraite, recevront leurs prestations de pension à partir de 60 ans. Ils devront toutefois avoir travaillé pendant au moins 10 années consécutives dans le secteur au moment de leur retraite. Plus encore, le projet de loi prévoit également le versement d'une prime de fin d'année équivalente au montant de la prestation mensuelle à tous les bénéficiaires. Monsieur le Président, si le premier volet des bénéfices induits par le vote de ce projet de loi est relatif au versement de la pension de retraite, le second volet se concentre, lui, sur les indemnités versées en cas d'accident du travail. Dès lors, en ce qui concerne les indemnités pour accident du travail, elles seront versées à un employé du secteur privé sur la même base que celui du NPF à compter du 1er septembre 2020. Toutefois, guidés par les principes de la justice sociale, nous augmenterons considérablement le montant maximal de l'indemnité mensuelle payable à un employé blessé. Ce montant va passer de 15 920 roupies à 40 000 roupies. À cet effet, les principaux types de prestations sont les suivantes. Premièrement, une indemnité pour accident du travail est prévue en cas d'accident du travail entraînant une incapacité temporaire totale de travail au taux de 80% du salaire mensuel de l'employé jusqu'à un maximum de 40 000 roupies par mois. Deuxièmement, une indemnité d'invalidité sera payable au taux de 80% des gains mensuels du salarié jusqu'à un maximum de 40 000 roupies lorsque l'invalidité est de 100%. Si l'invalidité est inférieure à 100%, le taux est de 65% du salaire mensuel de l'employé multiplié par le pourcentage d'invalidité jusqu'à un maximum de 32 500 roupies par mois. Troisièmement, une prestation de survivant sera allouée au conjoint d'un employé décédé à la suite d'un accident du travail, à un taux de 50% des gains mensuels de l'employé décédé, jusqu'à un maximum de 25 000 roupies par mois. Quatrièmement, une allocation pour assistance constante sera versée dans le cas où un employé souffrant d'une incapacité ou d'une invalidité nécessite l'assistance constante d'un tiers. Et enfin, le versement d'une allocation d'orphelin est lui prévu pour l'orphelin d'un employé décédé à la suite d'un accident du travail. Monsieur le Président, pour étendre au plus grand nombre la protection sociale qui s'impose, nous élargissons le versement des indemnités pour accident du travail aux travailleurs indépendants. Par cet apport historique, ce sont plus de 200 000 Mauriciens qui seront maintenant protégés. À partir du 1er septembre 2021, tous les travailleurs indépendants, artisans, maçons, coiffeurs, marchands ambulants, chauffeurs de taxi et j'en passe, bénéficieront d'une assistance contre les accidents du travail. Rendez-vous compte, c'est considérable. Grâce à cela, plus de 200 000 personnes auront des droits qu'ils n'avaient pas avant. Ils le méritent tant. C'était une annonce faite dans le discours du budget 2021-2022. Nous tenons nos promesses et faisons à peine plus d'un mois après la présentation du budget de cette déclaration une réalité. Les travailleurs indépendants sont essentiels à notre tissu économique et à notre résilience sociale. Nous leur assurons considération et protection. Pour cela, ils doivent participer à l'effort collectif. C'est cela le respect, le progrès, l'équité, les droits et les devoirs. En un mot, la démocratie. Monsieur le Président, j'en viens maintenant aux dispositions du projet de loi relatives à la gestion et à la révision des prestations sociales. Conformément aux articles 32 à 34, ce sera le ministère de l'Intégration sociale, de la Sécurité sociale et de la Solidarité nationale qui versera les prestations sociales dues à toute personne éligible. Ce ministère sera également la seule autorité à déterminer les demandes de prestations si un employé a subi ou non un accident du travail. En ce qui concerne la révision des prestations, nous allons mettre en place un comité dédié, le Social Benefits Review Committee. Il sera composé de représentants du secteur public, des organisations patronales et des organisations de travailleurs. Le mandat de ce comité sera de faire des recommandations au ministre des Finances en vue d'améliorer au besoin les prestations sociales tout en maintenant la durabilité et l'équité de ce modèle. Car chaque fois que cela est possible et justifié, nous pensons qu'il est du devoir du gouvernement d'améliorer les conditions de vie de la population. Monsieur le Président, alors que je m'apprête à conclure, permettez-moi de réaffirmer l'engagement de ce gouvernement auprès de la population. Sous le leadership du Premier ministre et en pleine tempête économique et sanitaire, nous n'avons jamais baissé les bras face à l'adversité. Notre combat pour une société plus juste et plus solidaire se manifeste ici encore par l'introduction d'un nouveau paradigme de contributions et de bénéfices liés à la pension de retraite et aux accidents de travail. Ce paradigme, il est juste car il est en phase avec les aspirations de la population et les défis que notre pays doit relever. Franklin Roosevelt avait dit « Gouverner, c'est maintenir les balances de la justice égale pour tous. Au travers du vote du Social Contribution and Social Benefits Bill, nous honorerons ces paroles de vérité. Progressistes nous sommes, progressistes nous resterons. Sur ces mots, je recommande le projet de loi à l'Assemblée. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm now proposing an amendment in clause 2 of the bill relating Rodrigue Regional Assembly at committee stage, which is being circulated in the House. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Seconded.
Speaker, thank you for giving me the possibility to say a few words on this very important piece of legislation. Before I start on the main body of my speech, I'd like to say that this bill, Mr. Speaker, is presented to this House at a time when the whole matter of contribution sociale généralisée is being taken up in the courts, actively being taken up in the courts, with two cases, one for judicial review, another one a constitutional case. These two cases are ongoing against the contribution sociale généralisée. Here we come in Parliament, we just take out the généralisée and we keep contribution sociale, and we present a bill which I consider, Mr. Speaker, that the procedure may be valid, but it is certainly inelegant. It is certainly disrespectful of our Supreme Court, and in my view, Mr. Speaker, it is unethical. We should have waited for the courts to give their verdict, to give their opinion on the CSG regulations, and then come with a bill in this House. Now, Mr. Speaker, I've listened carefully to the speech of the Minister of Finance, full of promises of things to come, but not answering, regretfully, any of the qualms, of the apprehensions of experts in the field of pensions, of actuaries, and the like, of tax experts. Not even one word, Mr. Speaker, to enlighten the House here before the bill is passed, as to whether he agrees or disagrees with so many of the objections that have been raised outside in the House, in the press only a few days ago, by actuary Bernard Yen, for instance, and others. So, Mr. Speaker, are we therefore to have to wait till his closing speech when it's too late? As you know, there'll be 4 ministers speaking at the end of this debate, no member of the opposition. That is when he is likely to answer the objections raised around Mauritius, or will he not answer at all? And will he just completely ignore because he has no answer to the objections raised? Because he has no idea as to how sustainable this pension that is being proposed, this contribution sociale that is being proposed, will hold out in the future. Whereas, therefore, Mr. Speaker, that is what we must deduce, that this is all being brought in haste and without adequate thought and adequate planning. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we were all enlightened by what the Prime Minister said, I think it was yesterday, the day before, in court, saying that it had the promise made in November 2019 at this famous old age pensioners meeting. I think it was in Vivekananda, if I'm not wrong, whereby, in fact, the pension would be doubled to 13,500 rupees. That was made, Mr. Speaker, without going to cabinet, without informing the then Minister of Social Security. In fact, nobody, it seemed, but the Prime Minister had thought of it. So that shows, Mr. Speaker, that it was made in haste and it was made without consultation and without planning. And this is, Mr. Speaker, one of the issues, probably the main issue relating to this particular bill and this particular pension or CSG that is being proposed. Mr. Speaker, not a word had been said at that time about how this promesse mirobolante of doubling the pension for old age pensioners, it's not quite what has been done today, how this was to be financed. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say also that in reaction to what the Prime Minister had announced at the time, the Alliance Nationale, of which I am a member, made a similar promise that we would raise the pension to, I think it was 14,000 rupees at the end of this mandate. We did make the same, but with a big difference, Mr. Speaker, that we took the pain, the trouble to explain to the population how this would be financed. We took the pain and the trouble to explain how it would be financed through growth, which is important. Growth determines pensions. When you look at the pension in the UK, a basic retirement pension in the UK is 32,000 rupees per month, equivalent. Nobody bothers about it because UK has such a strong economy that it can easily bear 32,000 rupee basic retirement pension. So growth, prosperity is the key to pension payments, Mr. Speaker. The second thing we said, we would reduce wastage in public, reduce le train de vie de l'État. And you can see, Mr. Speaker, only looking at this budget here, that instead of reducing the train de vie de l'État, this government has gone on a wild spending spree. On a wild spending spree. Safe City, Côte d'Or Stadium, MIC, wherever. Big spending spree, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, no reduction of ineffective expenditure, and of course, no elimination of corruption. And these are all things that we said we would do, Mr. Speaker, to reach without pain the 14,000 rupee pension that l'Alliance Nationale had promised to the nation and we would have put into effect. With these provisos, Mr. Speaker, bringing growth, saving unnecessary expenditure and cutting wastage and eliminating corruption, Mr. Speaker. In fact, Mr. Speaker, had the Alliance Mauricienne announced at the time that not only would they grant the big increase in pension, but that there would also be a big increase in taxation, I think, Mr. Speaker, they would not have reached half the votes that they actually got in that election. Had they told the nation that they would eliminate the NPF and destroy the National Pension Fund, which had existed 45 years, and given good and valuable service to the nation, that they would have cancelled the National Pension Fund, closed it down, without even a thought, without even a consultation, and without even a white paper, then, Mr. Speaker, they, as I said, would have got only a quarter of the votes that they actually got in that election. So the election, can be said, Mr. Speaker, was won on false promises, excluding whatever happens in the courts, was won on false promises, playing on the vulnerability of people and the fact that a month or two before the election, nobody had really time to look into the figures much and to see what in fact was being proposed. Although we all knew, Mr. Speaker, that there was a denial on the part of the Alliance Mauricienne to talk of the actual figures and to come to the nitty-gritty of it. Mr. Speaker, so the truth is that there's a huge new tax being imposed on the nation. Huge new tax to every single worker in this nation, including, of course, the self-employed. And, Mr. Speaker, all the middle-income earners in the private sector will see their disposable income severely curtailed, have seen their disposable income severely curtailed since September 2020, when, far from achieving growth, our economy, in fact, has been in deep recession, 15%, I think, negative growth over the year. People out of work, Mr. Speaker, officially, 94,000 people out of work. That is the figure from Statistics Mauritius when it was still credible. 94,000 people out of work, Mr. Speaker. 68,500 jobs lost in 1 year, according to Statistics Mauritius, quarter 2021, compared to quarter 2020. The Minister of Finance is nodding his head. He knows the figures. The rupee, Mr. Speaker, has been devalued massively. The disposable income of the nation, Mr. Speaker, sir. At a time when maybe 1 or 2 wage earners in the country are out of work in every family, because to account for the 94,000 people who are out of work as we speak, Mr. Speaker. And of course, we are talking about paying the pension as from 1st July 2023. Why it isn't being paid today, as we are being taxed today? Again, the Minister has not told us why he has thought it fit to tax us from the 1st of September 2020, but not giving us a cent as pension, and that pension will only be given, hopefully, in July 2023. Having, therefore, tendu is the word, for nearly 3 years. Taking 21 billion rupees as taxpayers' money, as tax, from all these taxpayers, without paying 1 single cent in pension to anyone. Where is the legality of that? Where is the fairness of that? Tell us, Mr. Minister, when you speak later. Where is the fairness? I've been paying CSG from the 1st of September, as has everybody. But not 1 single taxpayer, 1 single pensioner has received the 4,500 rupees you promised. Although I have been paying 4,500 rupees, I've been paying my contributions since the 1st of September. Why is that? It has gone to reduce your budget deficit, hasn't it? It has gone to the consolidated fund, hasn't it? You have used it for other things, haven't you? But you have claimed it from us to pay to people, to pensioners. So, Mr. Speaker, there's an issue here of fairness. That money, okay, we'll pay for it. It must be paid now to the pensioners. We are paying now the tax. It must be given now to the pensioners, not in 2 years' time. Not in 2 years' time. It should, in fact, be backdated to September 2020, when the tax was applied to everyone, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the situation in Mauritius has been so dramatic as far as l'appauvrissement de la population, l'appauvrissement de la classe moyenne, that the government has come up with an unprecedented, in my experience, unprecedented, maybe back in the 1970s we were there, of unprecedented measure to subsidize the price of 7 categories of essential products. That is an ambition. That is an ambition that people are having trouble to make ends meet. That is an admission that things are bad, bad, bad. For the Prime Minister himself to come to this house on a Friday to tell us that he has put aside 500 million rupees to help for various things like fromage and etc., because obviously the nation was not starving, but the nation was starting to tighten its belt, was starting not to be able to fill its belly at the time that it would every day. And that is the only explanation why this subsidy has come into effect at that time. Mr. Speaker, had the Minister of Finance, had the Prime Minister in his famous speech told the nation that henceforth all self-employed, all of them, even those earning 10,000 rupees or less, would start paying contributions sociales généralisées, whereas they were exempt from the NPF. Wow. I wonder how many of them would have voted for the Alliance Mauricienne had they been told that. But there's worse than that, Mr. Speaker, because the bill here is a bit of an insult, Mr. Speaker, to the Chijimun, because it goes on to say, in fact, that this bill, described as self-employed, obviously the lawyers, etc. We don't worry too much about them at the moment. But even says, Mr. Speaker, the maçon, le menuisier, they're all in the bill. Le plombier, le coiffeur, I will add, le chauffeur de taxi, marchand goyave de Chine, all of them, marchand d'Alpouri, all of them now will feel wonderful to have to contribute monthly to, in fact, Mr. Speaker, they will find that their life has been very amer. And that is the truth, because there are two issues to do with self-employed. Firstly, they were never before contributing to the NPF, unless voluntarily doing so. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, they have to pay their contribution on a calculated amount, net income. How do you calculate net income of these Tijimun? They have to maybe come and see me to do equivalent comptable, expert comptable, to come and do their net income monthly. Take a maçon. He's constructing a house for 6 months. He's charged 2 million rupees. He has to pay labor. He has to pay his construction material. Oh, he has to pay all this. And now who's going to calculate how much net income he has monthly? If he chooses to monthly. And it's difficult to calculate it monthly. You need a quantity surveyor even to tell you how much of the work has been completed monthly. So is he going to take a quantity surveyor and an accountant as well? I mean, what is this, Mr. Speaker? That they have to pay on their net income. It's really difficult. It takes time. It needs professionals to calculate net income on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. This is what, Mr. Speaker, is being asked of the marchand d'Alpouri, of the marchand goyave de Chine, and everybody else. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we have a double blow to the Tijimun. A double blow. Triple blow, if I may say so. Firstly, they didn't used to pay. Secondly, they need to calculate the net income, which is not easy to calculate. It takes, if you want to do it right, an expert to do that. And thirdly, they have to contact the MRA digitally. So the guy, the maçon, the whatever, the charpentier, he's got to buy a computer now, he's got to learn all about it and submit digitally. So these are three things, Mr. Speaker, that I find quite unacceptable. And it's going to be an administrative nightmare for the Tijimun. I know that there was going to be a regulatory impact assessment committee, which you are proposing. I think this in the finance bill. Well, have you passed this through that sort of committee? Have you discussed the issues, the weight, the burden that you're putting on the Tijimun now? With all of them potentially going to be a tax evader because he won't know how to do it properly. So, Mr. Speaker, what about those employees on the lower rung of the ladder in the private sector? They will. The tax will be less. But except that, the NPF was not a tax. Never was NPF a tax. The best description of this, to talk about the National Pension Fund was like each individual in the private sector had like a bank account at the NPF. He had like a bank account. He had his number, long number, attached to his NPF number. Every month, his employer would deduct the amounts and he would pay to the NPF. That money, the NPF Investment Committee would invest for a return. On his retirement, that money would still be there. It won't have gone to build drains, it won't have gone to build bridges or stadiums, it won't have gone there like it's going at the moment. It would go to his personal account at the end of his life, usually 65, at the end of his working life, usually 65, he can opt before, he would reap the benefits of his savings, what is called a forced savings, Mr. Speaker. That was the MFF. The NPF, the forced saving was at 3%. Not a tax. He wasn't giving to anyone that money. He was giving it to himself in his own account. That's all. That, therefore, was not taken from him, but being saved for him, being saved for his retirement. That is the big difference. Whereas this one, for the lower rungs of the ladder, of course, it is less, but it is not a saving, it is not his. It is being taken away from him to pay in the future a rate of pension which the minister has deliberately evaded that point in his speech, which is aléatoire. How much exactly is going to be paid to future generations? He has taken the trouble to put in Section 35 a proviso, this one, Social Contributions Committee or something like that is called, Section 35, which will decide in the future as to what benefits are payable, depending on affordability and sustainability. So there is in this time bomb, this ticking time bomb, there is one way that is provided to diffuse the ticking time bomb, either by raising contributions when this committee gives its advice, or by reducing the contributions that have been promised, the 4,500 rupees. Nothing is more uncertain than the ability of this government to honor its promise of paying the 4,500 rupees at the time when it needs to be paid, as has been extremely well explained by experts in the field, Mr. Speaker. We're not probably talking about 2023, although that also there's a question mark. But certainly we're talking about future years. Mr. Speaker, when I arrived in Mauritius in '86, there were 45,000 people over the age of 65. 45,000 people. Today, there were 170,000 people over the age of 65. So 3 times, it's gone up 3 times over those number of years. This illustrates more than anything, 45,000 to 170,000 today. Illustrates more than anything the aging issue that needs to be addressed by the Minister of Finance. The aging issue. This is why we all expected a different speech from the Minister of Finance than was given to us. The aging issue, Minister of Finance. What about it? What about it? Mr. Speaker, in 2024, when we'll start to pay the first full year, when we'll be paying the CSG. And I hope that it is paid. I hope that we can get it to be paid. There'll be 180,000 people, Mr. Speaker, over the age of 65. Now, you need to add those people with injuries, industrial injuries. You need to add people who have opted for earlier retirement in the various schemes that are possible in the law. Let's say you have 200,000 people in 2024 that will be eligible to the contribution sociale non généralisée. So, Mr. Speaker, you have about 200,000 people. That would be 12 billion rupees. Just simple calculation. 12 billion rupees to pay in 2024. We collected, Mr. Speaker, 5 billion rupees over the last year, but only 10 months, we agree. So, in fact, we collected, over an annualized basis, 6 billion rupees this year. 6 billion rupees on page 464 of the estimate, you'll find it. 5 billion rupees, annualized 6 billion rupees. So, Mr. Speaker, make no mistake about it. We need to go from 6 billion rupees in 2020, 2021 to 12 billion rupees in 2022, 2024, when the amounts will be paid. That is no coming out of that. There's no way of escaping that. That is the truth. How it's going to be raised, not a word from the Minister of Finance, and that is so disappointing. So disappointing. 6 billion rupees, as at today's date, has got to be moved to 12 billion. Now, I know that in the estimates he has been projecting some increase in the collections for this particular financial year. But explain how that is arrived, because many people don't believe what has been written there. Of course, Mr. Speaker, there are two ways you can raise additional taxation. The same, it comes back to the same thing, because the money has got to be taken from the employees to the coffers of the government. Whether you do it in one of each ways, or the two ways I'm telling you, you still have the same result, that you need 12 billion rupees from 2024, 2024. Just two ways to do that. Any Minister of Finance knows how to do it. One, you increase the base, you enlarge the base, more items are being taxed, like you would do, for instance, for VAT, or you would increase the rate. Or you will increase the rate from 4.5% to another percent for the low income, from 9% to another percent for the higher paid people. Two ways you do it. Now, there is particularly difficult drafting in the law, to try to determine exactly whether the base amount to be taxed has been changed or not since CSG regulations. But let's take it, Mr. Speaker, and we'll come back to that at committee stage, because it will be an important committee stage. We can come back at committee stage, because the drafting is awful, in my view. Nevertheless, let's say that the base hasn't changed really, that it is still basic wage, although there is some confusion on that, plus basic wage, basically. Let's say that this is still the case. The only change that we can see apart from that is now the 13th month will be taxed, whereas the 13th month was not taxed previously. That is what we see as a change in base. Obviously, the MPF, whether it was 3%, 9%, whatever percent, was never on the 13th month. So this is another way now we have increased the base a little bit for collection of money. So, Mr. Speaker, we have not really increased the base, apart from that 13th month, which will bring in about 500 million rupees. Where is the money coming from? Now, this is about the fifth time I'm asking. I hope that in your conclusion tonight, you will tell us exactly, precisely, Mr. Honourable Minister, where the money is coming from the 6 billion to the 12 billion in 2 years' time. That is, Mr. Speaker, important for us to know, so that taxpayers have no doubt at all what is going to come. As I said, so, Mr. Speaker, whether it is an increase in base, whether it is enlargement of the base, or whether it's an increase in the rate, it's the same thing. 12 billion rupees must come additionally to the coffers of the Ministry of Finance. Of that, there can be no doubt, Mr. Speaker. This is why this law represents a massive taxation of the population. 12 billion rupees to be collected every year is a massive amount of tax to be collected, from whichever source you collect it amongst the population. It is a massive taxation of the population. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's move on from year 2024. Let's move on 10 years. And if you move on 10 years, Mr. Speaker, obviously it's not going to be any surprise that the aging population will increase. Statistics Mauritius, I presume the figures are independent this time. Statistics Mauritius tell us that there will be 62,000 more pensioners over 65 over the next 10 years. So these people, also these persons, have obviously full right to get this 4,500 up in the sky at the moment. But worse, the problem is worse than that. Because when you look at the labor force, it will be reducing by about the same number, in the same number of years, in the next. So, one, you have 60,000 people, older people, and at the same time, 60,000 people less in the workforce to pay for the pensions, for the CS contribution sociale, social contribution for these people. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, it's a ticking time bomb. And that is why every Mauritian has a right to be told how the Minister of Finance is going to finance not only in 2023-24, but over the next 10 years from that time. Because then we'll be after the next election. And he has to tell us now where the money is coming from, because those persons that are actually paying less, the lower income, they may have a very severe, a very bitter pill to swallow. If, as seems to be the case, the CSG is not sustainable. The CSG, as it stands, is not affordable. The rate of contribution would then increase, as has said so many actuaries, from the 1.5% to be equal to the old 3% of the NPF and even more. This is why, Mr. Speaker, we say on this side of the House that this is the ticking time bomb. And the issue is not today, because anyway we are paying without receiving any money. It will be partly in 2023-24 when the current contributions will have to double to reach that, and even worse after that. And we understand, therefore, why the Section 35 Social Benefits Review Committee, I've got the name now, why it exists. Because it will tell us suddenly, well, you know, we can't pay. There's a recession, you know, the growth hasn't been so much, this and that, the other. The 4,500 will become 2,500, as the World Bank has said it would. So, Mr. Speaker, now what about civil servants? There will be a PRB coming. It also concerns all of us. There will be a PRB coming. There will be increases. Now, has anybody asked the civil servants whether they'll prefer the cash in their pocket or whether they want to contribute to this contribution sociale? Because, obviously, whatever is taken in terms of contribution sociale will be deducted from the PRB allowances. PRB increase, and that is naked truth, Mr. Speaker. And then, Mr. Speaker, if you read the article a few days ago by Bernard Yen in L'Express, he said one thing. He said that some civil servants, under the new system, will actually be getting more money when they retire than they were actually getting on the payroll working for the civil service. He took the example of this person, 30,000 rupees, who is on the old system of the civil service, that is the defined benefits system, who would get 20,000 rupee in terms of his pension monthly. He will get another 9,000 rupees in terms of old age pension, and we will get another 4,500 rupees in terms of the CSG. Much more than he was actually getting whilst working. Is that what you want? Is that the system that you want to set up? Someone who is retired gets more money than when he was working? Really, gentlemen? Have you thought about it? And ladies, have you thought about it, really? I would have thought you would have answered that, Minister, because it was in the papers. How can you earn more in retirement than you did when you were working full-time? Where's the fairness to those people working? There is something wrong, and it must be fixed, Mr. Speaker. And of course, the old NPF was not such a bad thing after all. Was not such a bad thing after all, because under the right circumstances, it would pay about 6,000 rupees per month to a pensioner. Had you worked full-time, paid your contributions for all your working life, you could be entitled to between 3,000 and 6,000 rupees. That was that. And we were told that it is not funded, but we were never given, not properly funded, we were never given the actual report that people had asked for. So, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, it's good for me to mention again, We promised l'Alliance nationale that we would pay, but we promised also that we would not tax. We would not tax to pay for it. We would get it by growth, by savings, eliminating corruption. That is what we promised. We didn't promise to take the easy way out, that is tax massively, and then honor the promise that was made. Mr. Speaker, now what about the effects on the minimum wage? Now, in 2 years' time, we'll be getting 13,500 rupees as pension, the minimum wage. Will stay at 10,000? I hope not. I hope the minimum wage will not stay at 10,000. The minimum wage, there must be parity, there must be, the ratio must be respected between the current minimum wage and the pensions, and the future pension and the future minimum wage. Now, in 2 years' time, when the pension becomes 13,500 rupees, just to maintain the ratio, the minimum wage must then go up to 15,300 rupees. Let's get this figure right. Let me repeat it. To maintain the ratio between the current minimum wage and the pension, we are talking about a minimum wage of 15,300. I'm all for it. I'll vote for it right now. But tell me, what is your estimate of the effect on employment, on the effect on the export processing zone, export-oriented enterprises, on the effect on the economy? This must be given, this figure must be given. It's going to be in 2 years' time, Mr. Speaker, sir, in just 2 years' time, 2023. We are 2021 at the moment. So tell us what you are going to do with the minimum wage. Don't run away from it. I hope that the minimum you will do is to tell us that the minimum wage will go up to 15,300 or more. But say that and account for it and tell us how it's going to affect the economy. Have the courage to do that. Have the courage to do that. Mr. Speaker, this also, as we know, for the problem with the CSG is it is a payroll tax. There are a number of taxes, Mr. Speaker, you can have. The French like a payroll tax. That's why there's all been unemployment in France, especially youth. The French like payroll tax. You can have a tax on profits, which is a normal thing. You make a profit, you pay tax. You can have a tax on your sales, value-added tax. It's a tax on sales. You make a sale, you pay a tax. But when you employ people and you pay a tax, that is more unusual. Especially when you raise a tax on employment at the time of huge unemployment in this country. Whatever is going to happen when you open the frontière, we'll get more than the 1,500 tourists we're getting until October. I hope so. I hope so. We get more than 1,500. But let's see what happens to employment. This law is being passed today. Let's see what happens to unemployment, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I'll say one thing, Mr. Speaker, that nobody has spoken of. What about the effect on foreign investors? Let's take someone who's working in the free port. His company will pay 3%. If he's an expatriate, Mr. Speaker, he's going to have a big salary. He's not come here for peanuts. His salary is going to be 500,000, 1 million. It's his company. He's making profits. 1 million rupees. You're going to tax him 90,000 rupees every month? And he's going to stay in the free port? When he knows he's not going to retire in this country? He's an expatriate? What about the financial services sector? One thing that defines the financial services sector is high pay, low taxation, attract people here. Come, set up family offices. Come and set up GBC1s. Any high salary in Mauritius is low taxation. Rubbish. We're going to pay every single expatriate that comes is going to pay 9% on his own salary. And I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, I've done my best to stop it. I know some people in the Freeport who are leaving, who have already taken the trouble And if the Minister of Finance wants to meet them, I will arrange it, because I'm above all a patriot. They are leaving this country, Mr. Speaker, because of the contribution sociale généralisée, because this guy doesn't want to pay 9% on his own salary and all the salaries of the expatriates. And what will happen to the dozens of highly paid people that work for him? What will happen to them? Who is going to pay to feed their families? So let's answer also the question, has there been a study, has EDB, bless them, soon there will be new officers, has the EDB worked out the effect on the financial services sector, on the free port, etc., of taxing massively people like this, expatriates? Because there is no exemption for expatriates, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, I've talked, maybe I don't want to go on and on and on. I'm sure you'll be fed up with me in a moment, but let's see. Already fed up, okay. Now, Mr. Speaker, I talked about this, right. Mr. Speaker, the NPF was set up in 1976. We were still young nation, few years only after independence. But we were clever enough when we set up the NPF to have a white paper. The then minister, I forget his name, had a white paper in the NPF. They knew they couldn't master, they were not masters of the world. So they asked the UK to send some consultants over to determine in what form and shape the National Pension Fund should take. And we took the advice of these experts, and the NPF was set up. The NPF today has been abolished without any study, without any consultation. I tell you, I ask you, Mr. Speaker, are we progressing in this country, or are we regressing? The CSG, same. Without any prior study, it was just an announcement in November 2019 by the Prime Minister himself, because he doesn't have to ask anyone. There you are, Mr. Speaker. That happened in November 2019. And now, Mr. Speaker, there are question marks which are genuine question marks being asked. I repeat, this was in our program to increase the pensions. There are now today genuine question marks that are being asked. There is a case in court which we need to respect, and we need to wait for the outcome of the case in court. Mr. Speaker, up to now, the government has not gratified this House with any figures at all about how sustainable this is going to be, even in the short term, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, with the information that we have at this stage, we think, Mr. Speaker, I think, Mr. Speaker, that the social contribution bill is a highly dangerous ticking time bomb for generations to come. Maybe not for me, I'm already 63 years old, but for my children and for my children's children. We do not want to lie to the population to tell them that something is achievable when clearly it might not be achievable. We don't want to lie to future generations to tell them that this is what's going to happen when clearly it may not happen. So this is why, Mr. Speaker, my request to the Honourable Minister is to hold on with this bill, carry on with the regulations if you want, hold on with this bill, wait to the court to decide, and wait till you have provided us with a white paper and the proper study to show us how this is going to work, how this is going to be achieved, and how, Mr. Speaker, this is going to be paid for. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me start by replying to the leader of the opposition. Well, I have listened very carefully to the intervention of the leader of the opposition. Let me start with our government has not taken into consideration the views of actuaries. Well, the views of Riskoura Solution, the actuary of NPF, has been taken into consideration to determine that the National Pension Fund will no longer be sustainable in the long term. Before coming with this present bill, there was a report of Riskoura Solutions, and I do know that we have taken the analysis of Riskoura before coming with before the presentation of the present bill. I will come to that in my speech at a later stage. I do know also that there were extensive consultations for the preparation of the present bill, contrary to what the leader of the opposition has just said. In fact, there was a ministerial committee, a technical committee, and a working group set up for the preparation of the present bill. I do also know that in the technical committee, there was an actuary, and all the views and experience of the technicians have been taken into consideration. On top of that, the working group comprised of many stakeholders, including representatives from the private sector, trade unions, and ministries. So how can we say that there has not been consultation? I also wish to clarify another point. The leader of the opposition has said that the NPF is being eliminated. This is not correct because contribution to NPF have stopped. Contributions have stopped, but the fund will continue to pay benefits to those who have contributed to the fund until the last person has been fully paid out what is owed. So we are not taking contributions, but the fund will continue to exist. I can reassure the House that no one will lose out on their contributions. Well, I think we need to understand that the bottom line is this, Mr. Speaker. Middle-class employees are contributing less under the new system, yet they will get more benefits than under the previous system. It is worth mentioning at this point that my ministry, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition has said that, of course, we are facing an aging population. We need to prepare ourselves. We need to have to analyze the situation to see in what ways we will cater best for our elderly. So it is worth mentioning at this point that my ministry is part of the Inter-Ministerial Committee on Demography and National Population Policy, chaired by the Honourable Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Education. So one of the key objectives is to cater for the well-being of our elders by providing them with the resources they will need and at the same time improve their conditions of living. So I was present in the meetings, and my ministry has made a presentation. So I wish to reassure the House that we are working to see to it that our elders continue to live with dignity and that they have access to adequate financial resources, protection, and quality care facilities, because this is one of our top priorities. So we are well aware of the challenges of an aging population. Well, the leader of the opposition has also said that the situation is dramatic, but I have not heard you say a word about the global pandemic COVID-19. So we all know that the world is going through a tough time. The world is going through a rough phase. The pandemic has affected the life of all of us, be it lower class, middle class, higher class. So I think when we need to understand the context the present bill is being presented, and we can't say that the presentation of this bill has made the situation of Mauritius dramatic. So, and at the same time, I want to add that we have taken a series of measures for our people to be able to survive the crisis. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, let me seize this opportunity to thank the Minister of Finance, Honorable Minister Padeachi, for coming up with the present bill. As the House is aware, the main object of the bill is to provide a regulatory framework for the administration and operation of the new social contribution and social benefit system. Before I explain why this new social contribution and social benefit system is fairer and equitable to our people, allow me to remind the House of the events that led us to the present bill being introduced in the House. The House will recall that in the budget speech of 2020-2021, the Honourable Minister of Finance had proposed a pension reform which is fair, equitable and sustainable for our economy. Le contribution sociale généralisée. The CSG came into effect through Section 42 of the Finance Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2020, which amended the National Pension Act 1976 by introducing a new Part 5A, Contribution sociale généralisée. This new system was implemented as from September 2020 with the introduction of Regulations 2020. Since the announcement of the CSG in the last year's budget speech to this day, much concern has been voiced out by different stakeholders. However, through the present bill, we are bringing an improved approach to pension on so many different levels. With a view to providing more detail and giving clarity on the new contribution and benefit system, we are coming forward with the Social Contribution and Social Benefits Bill, which will consequently repeal the Contribution sociale généralisée Regulations 2020. As I have mentioned at the beginning of my intervention, Mr. Speaker, there has been consultation with different stakeholders, representatives of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, my ministry, Business Mauritius, Mauritius Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Trade Unions. I do know that there was an interministerial committee, a technical committee, and a working group set up for the preparation of the present bill. So we are grateful for the constructive inputs brought by all the stakeholders, and I do know that many of the constructive inputs have been captured in the present bill so that we improve our benefits system. Now, the question is, why are we introducing a new social contribution and social benefit system? It is important for our people to understand that there is a very valid reason for the decision taken by government. Nos décisions ont été prises sur la base des faits en prenant en considération le bien-être de la population. We recognize, Mr. Speaker, that these decisions represent major change to the existing pension system. Since 1978, the National Pension Fund has been the country's key system for the collection of contribution by employers and employees of the private sector. It is, of course, a system that has served us well, but it simply would not have been sustainable in the long run. The decision to shift from the NPF to the new system has not been made lightly, Mr. Speaker. We have taken into consideration many factors, including, as I have said, the analysis of risk-courage solution, the actuary for the NPF, and also the analysis made by the International Monetary Fund. Let me take each of these in turn. Let us look at what the IMF had to say about our benefit system. According to the IMF Working Paper 2015, entitled Pension Reforms in Mauritius, Fair and Fast, Balancing Social Protection and Fiscal Sustainability, I quote, under the baseline projection, the NPF is not sustainable over this century. Assuming a constant ratio of benefits to the average wage, the NPF would exhaust its fund by 2063 under our assumption of 3% real return on assets. It would either have to lower benefits, increase contributions, or receive a government subsidy to cover promised benefits with employee contribution and returns from assets. Depending on the rate of return on assets, which is an extremely important variable, the NPF's assets might last until 2054 with a 1% real return, or until 2085 with a 5% real return. Only assuming a 5% return results in growing balances over the 20 years. The need to introduce reforms to this system to ensure that benefits do not fall.
There have been previous speakers who have requested ministers, when they're quoting like this from a document, they may be quoting selectively, I don't know, to in fact table the whole document so that the House can know exactly what is being said. Well, could we ask the Honourable Minister to table the document that she is referring to?
Yes, I have no. I will do the needful.
Monsieur le Président,
The point
un
of
point de
order.
clarification.
First of all, is this the point of order?
Point de clarification.
Honorable member, do you give way?
L'honorable membre vient de dire qu'il faut déposer sur la table, quand on est en train de faire référence à un document ou à un fait, ben j'aimerais bien qu'il, lui aussi, il dépose sur la table la référence qu'il a fait par rapport à l'État français. Comme quoi l'État français aime bien taxer, faire des taxes sur les salaires, et que par conséquent,
Order.
je peux
Order,
terminer,
order.
et que
Let
par
me deal
conséquent, ils ont un taux de chômage des jeunes
Please.
élevé.
You finish. Now, please, you continue.
So I was saying the need to introduce reforms to this system to ensure that benefits do not fall precipitously is further exemplified by the fact that absent reforms by 2100, the NPF will only be able to meet about 37% of projected benefits from the projected level of contributions, end quote. As you can see, the IMF is of the opinion that the NPF would eventually run out of funds and be unable to pay out the promised benefits, Mr. Speaker. So planning for the future is as important as ever, even more so that we are now in the middle of a global pandemic. We do realize that these are challenges. Our goal, of course, on this side of the House is to do right. Let us now have a look at the analysis of Riskoura solutions. In its report on the NPF for the period January 2014, June 2017, Riskoura solutions found that the cash flows will start to be negative around the year 2050, and by the year 2064, 2065, the fund will expire. So this analysis, Mr. Speaker, is very serious. As I have said, the bottom line is that we need to act. We need to take action. Of course, we understand that this analysis is not from members of government. These are the analyses of two impartial institutions. They identified major challenges, and it is the responsibility of a caring government to address the challenges. Maybe one would have expected government to leave things as they were, since we are talking about a situation that would arise in 25 years. But, Mr. Speaker, let us just imagine what would happen if we ignore these warnings and let the NPF continue as it is. Donc, on ne peut pas prendre des risques, il faut agir, et c'est ce que nous faisons. Several options were considered: extend the lifetime of the NPF, increase contribution rates, extend the retirement age, increase the value of pension points, or even remove the ceilings. However, none of these solutions would have been sustainable, and government decided that it would be better not to wait for the NPF fonds de pension to worsen. En tant que gouvernement responsable, nous avons pris les devants pour éviter un scénario qui serait catastrophique pour des milliers de citoyens mauriciens, Monsieur le Président. The new benefit system is under the responsibility of the Minister of Finance, as Honorable Minister Padeachi has mentioned in his intervention, and of course payments to beneficiaries will be made through the Social Security Division of my ministry. So, Mr. Speaker, I wish also to add that employees from the public sector, the private sector, and self-employed persons will gain from this reform. Let us have a look at the advantages of the new benefit system. First, low-income earners contribute a lesser amount than under the NPF. As has been mentioned previously, under the NPF, the contribution rate was 3% for an employee and 6% for an employer. The contribution was capped at a ceiling of 19,900 per month, ceiling rate for 2020-2021. On the basis of this ceiling, the employees' share of 3% amounted to 597 rupees, that is 3% of 19,900, and the employer's share of 6% amounted to 1,194 rupees, that is 6% of 19,900. Under the present bill, employees earning under 50,000 will pay 1.5% and their employers will pay 3%, while employees earning above 50,000 will pay 3% and their employers will pay 6%. So this clearly means that employees earning less than 39,500 will end up paying a lower amount than what they were contributing under the National Pension Fund. So, Mr. Speaker, for the first time, this reduction in contribution concerned some 283,000 employees, representing around 85% employees of the private sector. And this implies that their employers will also pay less under the new legislation. Now, the second point, pension points will no longer be the criteria to earn retirement benefits, Mr. Speaker. It should be noted that under the National Pension Fund, contributory retirement pension was calculated by taking into consideration the accumulated pension points which were defined by the contribution made during a person's career. However, under the present bill, we are doing away with the pension point system. We are therefore proposing a system which is simpler and fairer, especially for beneficiaries who earn a low salary. It is good for members of the House to know that beneficiaries who receive a low salary at the time of the employment made lower contribution to the National Pension Fund. These low contributions resulted in lower pension points and hence lower contributory retirement benefits. A contributor to the NPF system had to earn at least 150 pension points to become eligible for a minimum pension of 605 rupees. Let me take an example. If someone was contributing at the ceiling rate of 19,900, it would take more than 1 year for him to earn the minimum of 150 pension points or 605 rupees. However, if a person was contributing at the rate of 10,000 rupees, which implies his salary is lower, it will take him, Mr. Speaker, around 8 years to reach the minimum of 605 rupees. So we can see there is a disadvantage. Now, with the coming into force of the present bill, the pension point system will no longer prevail. Benefits will be payable irrespective of whether the person has contributed to the system or not. So benefits will be distributed in a fairer and more equitable manner. The next point, Mr. Speaker, what about the payment of bonus to those receiving retirement benefits? Under the National Pension Fund, beneficiaries of the contributory retirement pension were not paid a 13th-month bonus. Bonuses so far have only been paid to beneficiaries of the basic retirement pension. However, as per clause 23 of the present bill, provision has been made for the payment of a 13-month bonus to all beneficiaries of the retirement benefit. Encore une fois, Monsieur le Président, les bénéficiaires en sortiront gagnants. Another advantage of the new benefit system is the increased ceiling on industrial injury benefit. One particular interesting measure under the present bill concerns the increase in the ceiling on industry benefit as detailed in clause 25 of the bill. Mr. Speaker, you would agree with me that workplace accidents are unexpected and is a source of hardship to any employee. Previously, under the National Pension Fund, the industrial injury benefits paid to private sector employees was based on 80% of the employee's monthly earning up to the prevailing ceiling of 19,900. Now, with the present bill, we are providing a fairer system where the industrial injury benefit will be calculated on the basis of the employee's earning. Under the present bill, provision has been made for the injury allowance to be based on a ceiling of 80% of the employee's monthly earning, capped at 50,000 rupees. Let us say under the NPF system, someone was earning 15,000 rupees and was injured at work. His recovery period lasts about 6 weeks. The first 2 weeks would be covered by the employer, and for these 2 weeks, the employee will be paid his full salary. Any additional period will therefore be covered by the National Pension Fund. For the additional period, the person will receive injury benefit of around 12,000 rupees, which represent 80% of the monthly earning. However, if someone was earning 50,000 rupees and he got injured for the same number of weeks as in the case I have just mentioned, for the period covered by NPF, that person would receive an injury benefit of only 15,920, which represent 80% of the ceiling rate of 19,900. So with the new benefit system, the employee who is earning 50,000 rupees and get injured at work would receive 40,000 rupees. So as you can see, Mr. Speaker, the ceiling has changed to the benefit of employees. Let me tackle another important point, industrial injury to self-employed individual. Government is now we are taking a step further, Mr. Speaker, under the present bill. We have taken into consideration self-employed individuals. It should be noted that under the National Pension Fund, self-employed persons were not receiving any industrial injury benefits. We are all aware how difficult it is for self-employed person to meet his expenses if he is not working. So our government has deemed it necessary to provide support to self-employed persons in such difficult times. With a proposed benefit system, when a self-employed person suffers from an industrial injury, he will also be entitled to an industrial injury benefit equal to 80% of his monthly earnings. So, Mr. Speaker, I must add that we have also taken into consideration the hardship faced by their families in case the self-employed person passes away due to injury sustained during his profession. In such cases, a survivor's pension will be paid to the person's spouse, representing half of the deceased person's monthly earning. So the bill also makes provision for a disablement benefit in case the self-employed person is found to be partly or fully disabled as a result of the injury sustained. Mr. Speaker, without these reforms, these persons would have continued to face the same hardship as before. We do not believe that anyone should be left behind. We want to bring support and relief to our citizens. That is the main motivation behind these new changes. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, let me highlight that one of our government's priorities has always been the sustainability of a strong welfare state. We want our citizens to benefit from a good quality of life once they retire. We are very well aware of the reality of an aging population. We must therefore ensure that our people live well after retirement. Not only that, with increased longevity, we must also ensure that our people will live well for longer. We must consider the needs of all members of our population. So the purpose of this bill is to bring enhanced benefits as opposed to the lesser benefits previously available under the National Pension Fund system. The present bill, Mr. Speaker, is a solution for a safe, fair and equitable system of social benefits to all, not only one category, to all our citizens. The bill is a clear sign that our government remains steadfast in its commitment to continuously improve the quality of our people. So, Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we welcome the bill and we support the Minister of Finance. He has done a great job. We realize that it has not been easy for him, but what is more important at the end of the day, the social contribution and social benefits bill is in the House, and so we are all with the Honourable Minister of Finance, and we wish him well. Thank you.
The state has suspended the sitting for 30 minutes.